Welcome to Business Line's State of the Economy podcast, where you'll find insight, analysis, and the story behind the numbers.
Hello and welcome to the State of the Economy podcast. I'm Jyothi Datta. On December 26, 2004, India issued the Patents Amendment Ordinance that paved the way for an ecosystem that would eventually recognize product patents. After certain parliamentary procedures, this came into effect from January 1st, 2005. This week, we clock 20 years from this historic milestone in the country's patent journey. But why is that important? Well, product patents are not some esoteric concept, but it actually affects people's lives because when a patent is given to an innovator, they also get about 20 years of exclusivity on their product. Now, a key concern that's often voiced by public health experts is that such exclusivity sort of translates when it comes to medicines to their prices as well. And when there's no competition, that kind of prices the medicine beyond people's reach. Companies often try to say that there is no connection between price and patent exclusivity, and the reason why they command high prices is because they need to recoup their research cost. Now, it's a very complex subject, and helping us navigate this extremely complex space is someone who has seen the evolution of the patent journey in India from very close quarters, economist and distinguished professor, Council for Social Development, Dr. Biswajit Dhar. Thank you, Dr. Dhar, for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So it's been 20 years, for the product patent regime in India and a longer historic journey till this point. How would you see it? I know it's a really long period that we can't really telescope it into a brief moment, but initial thoughts on this moment in history that we are seeing now?
This was indeed a historic moment for India's in India's patent journey, because on 1st January 2005, we amended our 1970 Patents Act, whose central focus was to avoid granting product patents on pharmaceuticals. Now, again, this is another pretty long history. It goes back to immediate post-independence period. It was one of the first legislation, the colonial legislation that the new government reviewed was the Patents Act, the Patents and Designs Act of 1911, which was the colonial legacy and which had product patents. Now, the reason why the government reviewed this Patent Act was because the product patents, as you mentioned, unleash market monopolies, leading to high prices of medicines. And the government's efforts were soon vindicated by U.S. Senate subcommittee, which was looking at the patents issue in the early 60s, and which commented that the prices of medicines were among the highest in the world in India. And for a very poor country to have that kind of high prices was really denying access to medicine to a very large section of society. So the government, went through this process of amending the Patents Act, the Patents and Designs Act of 1911, and in 1970, the Patents Act was amended, and among other things, pharmaceuticals products were not granted product patents. The area of pharmaceuticals was covered by process patents. Now, in the aftermath of this decision, a remarkable thing happened in the Indian pharmaceutical industry. The generic producers, the Indian companies producing these medicines, they started coming onto the market, and by 1980s, by mid-80s, they were a force to reckon with. So if in the 60s, if the foreign companies were controlling about 2/3 least 3/4 of the market share in pharmaceuticals. By mid-80s, later half of the 1980s, the Indian companies were actually controlling 2/3 of the market, and they were providing very cheap medicines. And by then, India was recognized as a country which is providing one of the the medicines were among the cheapest in the world, and no wonder soon after we were called the pharmacy of the world, because we were producing large volumes of affordable medicines covering the therapeutic areas that you can think of, and serving not just the Indian population, but also many developing countries and developed countries as well. And that's the reason why we were called the pharmacy of the world. Now, all that, this happened since the 70s, was sort of reversed at one stroke when India signed the WTO or exceeded the WTO. And with the package came this agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, which made it mandatory for all the signatory countries to adopt product patents in pharmaceuticals. So this was what we did in 2005. We were, fulfilling our commitment made as a member of the WTO to introduce product patents. And of course, since then, we've been worried about the consequences, and we have already seen the consequences of market monopolies having a say in this whole question of affordability of medicines in India.
Right. That is a long journey that you've encapsulated, in your conversation. Now, there are some things that India seems to have done right, even as it kept its global commitments, isn't it? What would you see that,
Yeah.
in terms of public health, that India did take the right steps? What would you outline them as?
See, yeah, in the discussions following our accession to the WTO, we were successful in identifying elements in the TRIPS framework which would provide certain amount of flexibility to us from the point of view of helping the generic industry, pharmaceutical industry survive. And these are popularly called the TRIPS flexibility. We identified several areas. For instance, one area that we identified was that product patents will be granted, of course, but we would grant product patents only when we see a substantive innovation that has gone into a so-called new medicine. Why did we say this? Because in the developed countries, many of the older medicines, say for instance aspirin, which was discovered in the early 20th century, different formulations of aspirin, combinations of aspirin with other molecules, those were being patented, are still being patented in the developed world. Why? Because the companies said that they had new uses, or they had improved efficacy, and so giving these kinds of arguments, they perpetuated the patent monopoly. Now we said that, look, if the company is claiming a 20-year patent term on the basis of what you had mentioned in the introduction, or recouping their substantial investment in research and development, then the research costs for producing a new medicine should actually be substantial. They can't actually be doing tinkering with older medicines and then say that this is a new product and then claim a 20-year monopoly. Now, it's also from the point of view of rewarding innovators. This would be inequity, because some companies or individuals who actually put substantial effort and substantial investments in producing a new medicine, new molecule, would be then at a disadvantage from someone who's actually just done a minor innovation. So we had this thing that no formulation or combination and new use products, these will not be granted patents under in India. And this is Section 3D that we have in our Patents Act. And this is really a big innovation. The second thing that we did was that, we had this provision called a pre-grant opposition, which allowed a kind of a peer review of the patents that were being filed in India. So anyone could actually challenge a patent on the basis of, the criteria that we have, novelty, inventiveness, and usefulness. And anyone can challenge the patent saying that, look, this doesn't, it's not qualified to be granted a 20-year monopoly. Now that was helpful for a lot of public health activists, patient groups, and others who had sort of were repeatedly challenging some of these older products which are coming into the market and claiming market monopoly. The third issue, which was, of course, taken from the 1970 Patents Act, was the compulsory licensing system. Said that, it said that if the prices of medicines go too high, the availability is not adequate in India, and these products are not being worked in India in the sense of commercial production, then these products, which are under patent in India, and a license can be given to any company which was interested in producing this drug in India, and the government will ensure that the drug produced in India by an Indian company would be affordable. And we have this one example there where a medicine which was being sold by an American company for about 3 lakh rupees per patient per month, that the price was then reduced to 8,000 when a compulsory license was given to an Indian company. So these are some of, and there are, of course, there are others as well. But in sort of with broad brush, I can identify these 3 major areas in which we try to utilize the flexibilities available in the TRIPS agreement.
Right. You did mention Section 3D, which has been, depending on which side of the patent divide you are, been lauded as a great move or slightly contentious. How do you, and of course pre-grant oppositions and compulsory licenses, which allow an Indian company or a generic player to make an innovative product, paying a royalty. How do you see the implementation thereafter of these safeguards that are there in the Act, Doctor? I mean, we've seen one compulsory license that was given, and there have been a series of pre-grant oppositions, some for better or for worse. How do you see the implementation of the Act?
Yeah, on the implementation, I would say that we have not done well at all, and the reason being that on the issue of compulsory license, you just mentioned, only one compulsory license has been issued in these 20 years. And there are a lot of candidates, there are a lot of medicines which qualify for grant of compulsory license because they are just, they cannot be afforded by common people in India. A lot of these cancer drugs are really out of reach of common people. And surely there are Indian companies who can produce this in India at a much cheaper rate. But the major point of I think disappointment, as far as I'm concerned, is in the implementation of Section 3D. Now, as I mentioned, that we tried to ensure that only quality patents were granted, only products that had actually gone through this whole process of rigorous sort of R&D, and then it was a genuinely new product, only that product was given a strong monopoly of 20 years. So we wanted to sort of eliminate all these minor innovations, claims of patents on minor innovations, new use and other things. Now, lot of researchers have actually looked at the grant of patents, and especially the implementation of Section 3D. And we also did a study a few years back. And what we found is that if you look at, and of course we looked at the period between 2005 and 2019, and to our disappointment, found that almost 80% of the patents granted did not qualify or actually failed the test of 3D, of Section 3D. And they were formulations, they were combinations, and such like that. So it shouldn't have happened at all. So if 80% of the products are of that nature, then surely one can say that the implementation of the Patents Act leaves much to be desired. And recently, the government entered into a free trade agreement with 4 countries, the European Free Trade Association, and there we agreed to amending our Patents Act and to make the pre-grant opposition more difficult for individuals and others to come in and challenge the grant of patents. So all in all, I would say that we have a very good framework, but the implementation leaves much to be desired. And the unfortunate part is that the framers of this the present Patent Act, when they discussed in the Parliament, were very clear what the Patents Act was supposed to achieve. And I must say that if the discussion in the Parliament, which is the owner of this Patents Act, is any indication, then we haven't actually failed. We have failed the test of in terms of what the Parliament asked us to do, what the Parliament asked the government to do.
Very strong words there, Dr. Dhar. So against this backdrop, we have seen earlier this year, the center had said that it's granted over 1 lakh patents over the last 12 months up to March 2024. Now that statement also had a lot of IP experts, including yourself and others, who were concerned that it's not just about, the numbers you notch up, but also the quality. Would you like to explain that?
Yes, actually, like I said, that we wanted our Patents Act to be a leader in terms of how patents patent applications are evaluated, what kind of examination they actually are put through, so that only genuine innovations can be granted a market monopoly. Now, this is in my view, the patent monopoly is the strongest form of monopoly that you can have in a market economy, and the reason being that it is granted by the state, and the competition authority, our competition commission, and that is the case with all countries. They don't challenge this market monopoly because it is granted by another arm of the government. So that's the reason we say that if there are adverse consequences, the usual remedy in a market economy, which is the competition law, that can be applied in case of usually, and of course there have been cases in the US where this has been challenged, but usually they can't be challenged. Now, the problem that we have now is that too many patents are being granted, and which actually shows that the examination process the protocols being followed by the patent office is not really right. Now, there have been a lot of examples in different countries where some countries have actually became overzealous in terms of granting too many patents, and there have been a lot of criticism. The first country which faced this criticism was the US, which is where this whole the TRIPS framework was picked up from, and the competition authority in the US, the Federal Trade Commission, had adversely commented on the patent office. Of course, they couldn't do anything about it, but they adversely commented on the patent office, saying that the patent office is behaving as if patents are applied only to be granted. In other words, they are acting as a post office, that whatever applied, you just are granted. And that is, and then of course, Chinese patent office, suddenly we found a spurt in patenting patent grants. And so today China's patent office is the largest in the world, and found that their patent applications had gone up to more than 1.5 million a year. So, but both these countries have been introspecting about the quality of patents. In China, in particular, there have been there are a lot of discussions as to how they're going to be improving the quality of patents granted. Now, this is the problem that we are facing today, that because there are countries who are thinking about this, but we are actually not taking any cue from this global discussions in different countries on patent quality, and which is absolutely imperative for us to consider. And we are only thinking about numbers. We got into the patents game now, you may actually grant a lot of patents. There may be a lot of applications. You don't know how these patents, these R&D actually takes place. There've been a lot of Indian, individuals and companies who have come out and applied for patents. But patents are no indicator, and I want to emphasize this, they are no indicator of inventive activity. You need to back up the patents granted or the patents application by how much you are spending on research and development. And there we are actually doing pretty poorly. Since 2010-11, if you look at the trajectory of our research and development expenditure as a percentage of GDP, has actually come down. Not by much. In any case, in the first instance, we're not spending too much. We are spending about 0.7% of our GDP on R&D. Has now come down to about 0.63 or 0.64 around that range. So we are not going up, actually coming down. And that's what I want to emphasize. So the first thing that we need to do is to improve our innovation ecosystem. And if you recall, in 2016, the government had brought a national innovation policy, and it talked about improving the R&D ecosystem, ensuring that R&D expenditure in this country goes up. And if all that had resulted in larger patent applications, I still would have accepted it. But two things. One is that we don't spend enough on R&D. And the second, like all our studies which showed that the secondary patents, which are, the violation of Section 3D in our view, are become really rampant. These two actually show that, these patent numbers are really can have to be questioned, and that's why we are actually questioning these numbers of patents granted in India.
Those are worrying numbers in terms of research spends. So now with health spends, maybe one needs to look at increasing the research spends as well. As a final question, Doctor, where do you think the country needs to move, at least for the next few years, even if you don't take a 20-year horizon? And like some of your colleagues, do you think that it's time to review, where the country is so far in terms of the product patent regime? The time is right now. This 20 years milestone is a good enough reason to look at how the country is fared.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a pretty good time horizon, 20 years, for us to review what we had, how we have implemented the Patents Act, and like I said, that the touchstone for evaluating the performance was really what the Parliament had actually told us. And that should be made if I were to actually frame a terms of reference, I would actually go back to the discussions in the joint select committee and the discussions thereafter, and then reflect the desires of the honorable members of the Parliament in framing the terms of reference, and surely that should be done as soon as possible, because if you're from a situation where Indian Patents Act have always been a kind of shining star for developing countries. In 1974, there was an UNCTAD report. We've been quoting it time and time again, that the 1970s Patent Act was a milestone in terms of how a developing country could innovate and a legislation, get an innovative legislation which would help the interests or serve the interests of the developing countries. After 2005, recognized, and when it was recognized the world over, that Indian Patents Act, the amended Patents Act, is the way forward. And I think we are actually falling from that kind of high standards that we had set in terms of the legislative intent and what we had done. And surely this is the time to do a proper review. At the same time, I would also, since I raised this issue of R&D, the government has to take the responsibility of ensuring that more investment in R&D takes place. The world over, it's the government sector, and this has also been the case with India, it's the government sector which leads the R&D spending. And of course, in developing countries, which were sort of in the past, and today in many developed countries, we know how the COVID vaccines were produced in the US with substantial federal funding, and therefore the government has to step up investment in R&D and to ensure that we get quality innovation, and that would actually serve the interest of Indians much better. We'll be very proud of the patents that will then be granted to the Indians, saying that yes, these are actually landmark, sort of inventions and innovations, and we can proudly say that we are claiming patents and a monopoly for a very good work done. Until then, of course, we'll keep questioning whatever is happening in around the implementation of the Indian Patents Act.
That's very interesting. Well, we have a budget that's coming up, so hopefully we see something there on research spends, and
absolutely, we'll look forward to that.
Yeah, and also that more political leaders listen to this and sort of maybe take the best brains to look for a review of the product patents regime and put it back to, like you said, the shining star position on the international landscape. It's a fascinating topic, and we there's so many aspects to this, but for now I'll bring this discussion to a close. Doctor, thank you so much for your insights and time from the Business Line team and myself. Thank you once again.
So thank you very much, Aneem, for having me.